All right, so I'd like to welcome Dallas Jackson, who's based in New Zealand, but has an accent that you might recognize from another country. Uh, Dallas has a really fascinating background. She's been working as an Agile coach for some years and worked at Whole Foods in the US around the time of Amazon's takeover. And as part of that, worked with legal, HR, supply chain, quite a lot of non-software parts of that change. So I think she's got some really interesting perspective on how we could apply a lot of this more humanistic way of working, agile ways of working to non-software context, including social services, I guess not-for-profit sort of organizations. Dallas, who've been involved with some really interesting ones, sharing your wisdom with them. And I think it's wonderful to have her tonight. So look, without further ado, I think we'll hand over to Dallas. Please join me in welcoming Dallas Jackson.
Thanks, y'all. Also, thank you for just the warm welcome. I've been in Auckland for about 6 months, and as you can hear from my accent and my name, I am from Texas, and so just the warm welcome has been amazing. So thank you for that. I am, like Rowan said, I am an Agile coach. My philosophy, though, is we are humans first. We cannot escape our biology. So how can we actually take those things that make us human, that make us tick, and put it into work for us, whether we're doing agility and software development. I was a developer, so that's my bread and butter. But it's not just for them, right? It's for everyone. My son and my daughter now, they're both 14, have Kanban boards. And so to say that I've drank the Kool-Aid is an understatement. So kind of throughout the last 15 years, I've tried to think of and feel out things that would be beneficial to the Agile community that may not actually be strictly agility. So tonight I thought we could talk about influence. So I don't know about y'all, but I think every job that I have ever had in agility, whether it be a team coach, a Scrum master, a product owner, an Agile manager, the list goes on and on. Influence has been one of my responsibilities. It has been in the job description. It has been, the question is always asked, can you influence? It's like, yeah, for sure. Sure. The thing that happens, though, that I find is that we never actually go into how to influence. It's a very binary thing. You either influence or you don't. And so I really want to dig into how do we get people to yes. Okay. All right. So like I said, we have to influence in all parts of our jobs, whether it's a Scrum master or even a developer on a team. I've needed to influence while I've been a developer, a BA, product owner. It's a really, really important job. And the greater the impact that you want to make, the greater your influence has to be. So the interesting thing is when I started really thinking about how to influence, I asked myself, what was the definition of influence? The interesting thing is I got it completely wrong. Influence is the power to change or affect someone or something, the power to cause changes without directly forcing them to happen. And the thing is, influencing others is challenging, which is why it's worth understanding some of these principles behind it. Research has been done. We can actually date it back to the 1950s when they started to try to figure out how do you get people to say yes. And there is no doubt that there is a science to how we are persuaded. We are critters, and so kind of delving into some of the neuroscience behind it can tell us a lot, and it's actually really surprising. When we make a decision, I personally think that I want to be incredibly logical, and it would be nice to think that I consider all the available information and that I'm non-biased and all of this, that I'm very logical. But we live in the real world, and in reality, it's often very, very different. We have so much overload and in the lives that we lead, and more than ever now, we need kind of shortcuts or rules of thumb or kind of guardrails to really get us to figure out our decision making. So in this, we're actually going to talk about some of these principles called the levers of influence. And we want to understand these shortcuts so that we can employ them in an ethical manner. So that's going to be a big focus of mine tonight too. I never thought that I would quote Spider-Man in a talk, but with great power comes great responsibility. So whenever we do these things, we have to do it that is aligned to our ethics. These things can significantly increase the chances that someone will be persuaded by your request. And a lot of these are very low cost. So we want to influence people. So let's make shortcuts so that you can kind of pull those out whenever you need them. Like I said, we want to do this ethically. We'll think about the ethics of who you are and also the ethics of the organization. And we'll also, at the very end, I kind of added this on, we'll explore how you can kind of see through people who are trying to use these principles on you, which is one of the things that's really interesting to me right now. So we are actually basing this discussion on work by Robert Cialdini. And in 1984, he published a book called Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion. And he identified 6 shortcuts through experimental studies and by being immersed in the world of what he called compliance professionals. So what that means is that salespeople, fundraisers, recruiters, advertisers, marketers, those people that are skilled in the art of convincing and influencing others. About 3 years ago, he actually added a 7th, which we'll go into as well. Okay. So the first one I want to talk about is reciprocity. And the beautiful thing is, as humans, we generally aim to return favors. We want to pay back debts. We want to treat others as they treat us, the golden rule. And so with this idea of reciprocity, this can actually lead us to feel obligated to offer concessions or discounts or tit for tat if they have offered us something. What I think of is, I'm not sure how many of y'all are parents, but when my child was young and one of his classmates invited him to a birthday party, I was like, man, okay, I gotta remember to invite them. And this is because we as humans feel uncomfortable feeling like we're indebted to someone. So if a colleague helps you when you're busy with a product, like, hey, can you go do this? You might feel obligated or obliged to support their idea for improving a team process. With that idea, you can use that. You might decide to buy more, from a supplier if they offer you a really deep discount, or you might give money to a charity who gives flowers or something in return. People repay in kind, and whereby the application is basically give what you want to receive. And this induces that underlying sense of having to be, for lack of a better word, even. So to use reciprocity to influence others, what we'll need to do is to identify your objectives and think about what you want from the other person, and then think about what you can give them in return. The key is that what is given is valued and the other person feels willing to do something for it, right? Like, you don't want to give something that's not valuable to someone else. because then it'll kind of be lowered a bit. The thing that actually demonstrates this the most for me, and some of y'all might have heard about this study, is think about the last time you went out to eat. In the US, they'll bring you a bill, and sometimes they'll put little mints, in the tray. The question is, do those mints actually affect the tip? And the answer is an astounding yes. Most people actually, I would have put dollars to donuts that wasn't the case before going into the study, but that mint can make a really big difference. In this study, giving diners a single mint at the end of their meal actually increased tips 3%. You're probably thinking 3%, it's not that great. But the interesting thing is when they increased it to 2 mints, it didn't double, but it quadrupled to 15%. And then the most interesting part of that is if they gave a mint and they walked away, they came back to the table and was like, y'all are really nice, I'm going to give y'all some more mints. The tips actually went to 24% increase from the original. So the influence is not by what was given, but it was by how it was given. So the key to using, this principle of reciprocity is to be the first to give and to ensure that what you give is personal, unexpected, and valuable to the other person. That's reciprocity. So the second one I want to talk about is commitment and consistency. So this is, Cialdini actually kind of bundles these up together. And this is basically saying people like to be consistent with the things that they have previously said or done, right? This is why we try to get verbal responses, because we have a deep, deep desire in our biology to be consistent. And for that reason, once we've committed to something, we're more inclined to actually go through with it. Why do we ask teams to do the fist to 5? Because that's a bit of having a commitment to that work. They're committing to that during that time. Commitment is a big word in agility. And the reason is because it's an actual influence to all groups of people. So you're probably more likely to support a colleague's projected project proposal if you had shown interest when he first talked about it to you, like about your ideas, and he was interested in it. So people align with their commitments. Cialdini's research has demonstrated that most people, once they take a stand or go on the record in favor of a position, prefer to stick with it. We don't want to be wrong, which is sometimes what we think of when we change ideas or change kind of sides or change opinions. So if people commit verbally or in writing, then they are more likely to have that commitment. And it's important that they have free choice, right? In all of these, it's really important to have free choice. But in this one particularly, you can't say, hey, Rowan, hey, you agreed to that, right? Right? It has to be a free will. So try to get people's commitment early on, either verbally or in writing. If you're building support for a project, talk about the ideas early on with stakeholders and take their comments and views into account. Or if you're trying to sell something, sell a very small quantity, like a teaser, a taster, or make it easy for people to change their minds once they bought it. Here, buying the product early in the commitment, even though they have the right to return it if they want to. So kind of think of Kickstarter here. It's a really good example. Like people are saying, yes, I will buy it if you have enough people. So there's commitment there, but there's also a lack of, and there's also the ability to be able to kind of pull out at the end if you need to. So when seeking to influence under this principle, consistency, what we want to look for is voluntary, active, and public commitments, and ideally get those commitments in writing. If it's not written down, it never happened. We want to get those in writing. One study actually showed it reduced missed appointments at a healthcare center by 18% by just asking the patients rather than the staff to write down an appointment on a future appointment card. So just the simple act of actually not doing something for someone is increasing the consistency for them. They also like to be consistent with what they've previously done or said. So a lot of times I like to kind of approach this in an agile way. What is a small thing that you can get them to say yes to? Because once people say yes to one thing, it's a lot easier for them to say yes to the next little thing, and then the next maybe medium-sized thing, and then the next larger thing, because very few people would be willing to say yes to this swath of request. But if you break it up, it's a lot easier for them to say yes, and once they've said yes once, it's a lot easier for them to continue to go down that road of saying yes. With consistency, it's something that's almost the heartbeat of us. We yearn for kind of the same thing over and over again. And also when you see, in Tokyo, take the train system, that thing you can, set your watch by. And so you absolutely know that it's going to happen. And so if you're going to be there, you're going to be waiting, and you're not necessarily going to question if it's happening or not, because it's been so consistent that it's really, really rare for things to mess up. And when it does, it actually adds a little grace into it as well. So if you are consistent with people and you have those little path, segues off the path, there's so much more grace when you've shown consistency and commitment from the beginning. All right. So the third one is, we're about halfway, well, no less than halfway through. Social proof. Now, this one also is known as consensus. Cialdini kind of waffles back and forth on which one he uses. But especially when we are uncertain, people will look to the action and behaviors of others to determine their own. I like to refer to this as kind of the safety in numbers principle. For example, we're more likely to work late if others in our team are doing the same thing. We're more likely to put a tip in a tip jar if there's already money in it. We're more likely to eat at a restaurant if it's busy, because, well, if people are there, then it has to be good. We're assuming that if lots of other people are doing something, then it must be okay. We're particularly susceptible to this principle when we feel uncertain. So when we're not sure of action, when we haven't necessarily done either the research or made up our mind, we're even more likely to be influenced if the people we see seem to be similar to us. And that's why commercials, often use moms, not necessarily celebrities, to advertise household products. You can kind of use this principle to create the buzz around the idea or product or project. People are more likely to do things they see others doing, and related to our need to belong, to be respected, and avoid being ostracized, right? Like, if you think about us as critters, as biological critters, we are tribal beings, and we don't want to necessarily be outside of the tribe, because that means there's not safety for us. If we're trying to get support for a new project, work on generating support from key people in your organization. If there are people that are highly visible to others, it doesn't necessarily mean hierarchical authority or the, the highest paid people in the room, but who are those people that are really respected. Start the idea with them. Make sure that it's a grassroots movement. If people are buzzing about a product or a project, even if it's not in formal channels, that's creating social proof as well. Some of the best social proof that we can do is on coffee breaks. In Zoom, in our remote world, that's a little harder. But it's those questions or those places before and after meetings. It's like, hey, did you hear about this project that I'm working on, or this, this proposed solution that I have for some architecture or a process improvement? Those little nuggets can really be helpful to get some people kind of on board, and then they get others, and then it's, it has spread like wildfire in a grassroots movement. So you may notice, this is a weird example, but I really like it. Have you guys been to a hotel and seen like the little sign that says something about reusing towels can have a benefit on the environmental, the environment? Well, it turns out that it's a pretty effective strategy. It led to around 35% of compliance with just putting that sign up. But the question is, could there be an even better way? And so what happened was, it turned out that about 75% of people who checked into the hotel for 4 nights or more actually reused their towels at some point during their stay. So what would happen if, instead of that sign saying, reuse the towels because it's better for the environment, which is valid, but social proof, if we layered that on, it could say, hey, 75% of guests that stayed in your room have reused their towels. And your first thought might be like, I hope they're not the same towels. But your second thought may be, well, I don't want to be, that 26% or 25% that hasn't done it. So I'm going to go ahead and use it. Now, it might seem like a very subtle thing, but this is what we want to do when we influence, right? Like everyone on this call probably has more demand than supply on their time. And so little things that we can do to embrace these principles at a very low cost to y'all is what we want to hone in on. So it turned out that changing those few words on a sign to honestly point out kind of us versus them increased the reuse of towels by 33%. So a lot of these things aren't necessarily big swaths, but it's almost the nuance of changing language can help us. I mean, as humans, I think, Rowan was talking about his daughter earlier and, creating the language there. We're linguistic creatures. We feel by speaking. We are humans, and we are able to communicate by linguistics. And so changing those can sometimes have a huge impact on what you want to get out of it. So kind of have it scientifically validated that this is scientifically validated that small, practical, and costless, right? Like changing that narrative was costless to the hotel, can lead to huge changes, and it can also lead to persuasion of people that you wouldn't have necessarily gotten if you hadn't have used that language and those small little ticks and small changes. All right, liking. This is, I'm going to make a really weird analogy here, but that's fine. I'm not sure if any of y'all have seen the movie Step Brothers, maybe. But do y'all remember, so it had Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly, and they're standing in the room, and I think they're like one says that they like Ninja comics, and then the other one said that they liked it. And then John C. Reilly says, did we just become best friends? And Will Ferrell says, yup, that's what this is, right? We want to do more for people we like versus people we don't like. Likability comes in many, many, many different forms, but there's three things that really hone in. Are they like us? Are they going to compliment us? Or can they be an advocate for something that we need? So compliments, really easy. I think that when I started to practice my naive influence, I think I really leaned into compliments, right? Like if I compliment someone, then they'll like me, then they'll do something. And I think, with the conversations I've had about this, a lot of people do that as well. So the interesting thing is that if people think that it's inauthentic, it actually has the opposite effect. So again, you can't fake it. You can't fake liking someone because they will ferret it out. And what they will do is it will actually create less influence. So with all of these, but especially liking, don't be fake about it. Don't try too hard because people will see through it as phony. So what we want to do is, people who are similar to us, familiar to us, or simply just kind of being in the right place in the right time. Liking is also the other day it was about a month ago. I was at the grocery store and I heard someone say y'all, which is a very specific language of the Southern United States. And my ears perked up and I went crazy to the other aisle, bordered on stalking. But they said something and I was like, hi, like you said y'all, I said y'all, we have to be friends now because, no one says y'all in New Zealand anymore. And they were just as excited as I was. We had nothing in common. It was two different aisles, but the thing is that was an immediate bond. And what we can do is we can kind of use that to influence others. People are more likely to buy from people like themselves, from friends, from people they know, people they respect. My son has recently, the Texan in me cringes when I say that, but my son plays rugby and he's really good. He's a right prop. Yes, I know positions, crazy. But the thing is, when we were in the States for the past few weeks, there was actually a rugby tournament in Austin. And so we went and my son has just lit up because he could talk about something with these other people. He didn't know them from Adam, but it created a connection. And what that did was that he was actually the ball boy for one of the professional games that was happening. And that was only because they found similarities there. And think about that in the form of Agile coaching, Scrum mastery. Like, hey guys, like you're part of us. I want to be able to say, you're a Scrum master, I'm a Scrum master, we should be friends. And so building those communities of practice or centers of excellence, or just coffee walks, coffee talks, whatever you want to do to be able to connect to different people doesn't mean that you have to be completely alike. Just find something that can be similar. Find like this, this is kind of tongue in cheek, but this picture is, I love potato chips, so do I, let's do business. Like I've probably had contracts that were a little based on a little less than this. And so it's just finding that, honoring our connections, right? As humans, we all have connections. And so let's find them so that we're able to say, you know what, we're kind of alike and we can do business together, or we can help each other. We prefer to say yes for people that we like, right? Like that is just something that is natural. We want We want to say yes, we want to cooperate with people that have mutual goals that we do, and we want the interaction, more and more of the interactions that we are having to take, to take place with people that we enjoy being around. With so much of the interactions that we're having taking place online, it might be worth asking whether these factors can be employed, effectively in online negotiations. So, a lot of the training from the back of the room, virtual editions are really trying to help with that connection as well. So there was this study between MBA students at two well-known business schools in the US. And one group, Group A, were told time is money, get straight down to business. And in that group, around 55% were able to come to an agreement. In that second group, they were told, before you begin negotiating, exchange some personal information with each other. Identify a similarity that you can share in common, and what do you have in common before you negotiate. In that group, 90% of them were able to come to successful and agreeable outcomes that were typically worth almost 20% more than the other parties. So if we think about chartering events, if we think about the Tuckman model, going through forming, storming, it's really how do we kind of get past that? And a lot of that is also, what do we know about other people? And so liking kind of can help you kind of get through that storming as well, if we're thinking about team dynamics. So get your people to talk about themselves. And it's at different levels, right? Like a lot of us, not me, I will share everything, but I'm an anomaly in a world of software developers. I totally understand that. But just a little can really help. Even asking what their drink of choice is in the morning can help actually build that liking in a group. So saying, hey, Rowan, what are you drinking this morning? Him saying tea, we're actually liking each other. And that little things like that can actually help you start influencing without them even knowing that you're trying. All right, so authority. So I think this is the thing that people think about when influence, or people say influence without authority. And because that's how we influence. It's true, but I want to put a little nuance on it. Authority is not necessarily who can tell you what to do, but authority is people who have credible and knowledgeable expertise in that certain area. So we feel a sense of duty or obligation to people in positions of authorities. Uniforms, right? Like, what do you, I don't know about you guys, but when my son was little and I told him if we were in a big crowd, hey, if we get lost, go find somebody with a uniform. It's authority. It's why the actors you guys don't have this in the Southern Hemisphere, which I love, but there are so many medical commercials on TV in the US, and all the actors wear lab coats or white coats or, some sort of doctory thing, because people will listen to authority. People defer to experts. A physical therapist can actually get people to do more if they display their medical degree in the office. If you want to get support from influential and powerful people and ask them to use authority, ask for their help in backing the idea. So if you do have those people that have the authority, just asking them to back you can actually use their authority for your influence. So if you think of in a training or in any group, our brain isn't just our brain, it's everyone's brain in the group. We have a hive mind. Think of influence like this too. You may not have the authority, but if you can borrow someone else's authority by them backing the idea, it's a different form of influence, but you still get the benefit. So it doesn't have to be your authority. You can use someone else's as long as you get them on the idea and verbalizing their support of it. Okay. This one gets me usually Like, I'm just gonna be real honest. Usually when I'm in a shoe store and it's like the last shoe of my size, I have to get it because there's this, people want more of those things that they can have less of. So if you think about, people follow the lead of what other people want. And so if you're running out, then obviously other people wanted it. So when things become less available, they become more desirable. And there's a strong social aspect to this. And if we think about others are getting something that we might lose out of, then that affects, our survival mode almost. And, this is also linked with kind of the keeping up with the Joneses. Well, if somebody else has it, I have to have it. If you're selling a product, limit the availability of stock and set a close date for the offer, or create some special edition of products or something to make sure that there's a limited amount of just that. This principle can be trickier to apply within an organization if you're trying to influence others to support your ideas or projects. But a really good way to do this is, hey, we all have backlogs, and the scarcity of that is this going to be the number one priority, or is this going to get done based on the priority that was set forth? And so using scarcity in that way, using scarcity as a way to really figure out what the priority is, can be beneficial. If people want more of those things that they can have less of, you can really start talking about the value of it. A lot of times when I've been a product owner, people are coming to me and saying, well, since you're under the hood, let's go ahead and figure some stuff out. And so they're feeling that scarcity. But if you go in and make sure you ask about the questions, you're using scarcity almost on the flip side, where you're saying, hey, you're actually being influenced by scarcity, but there's not that much. We have this priority list. It may not be at the top, but it may be lower. And so just figuring out how you can talk to them about, are they feeling like it's a scarcity? If we don't start this now, they won't have it, or is there some real value behind it? Okay. And unity. So this is the last one that has been added. And this refers to a shared identity that both the influencer and influencee have. And the more we perceive people as part of us, the more likely we are to be influenced by them. And, this fits with kind of the entire theme of, the power of persuasion. To me, this strengthens the importance of those tribal values that we kind of talked about a little earlier in social proof. Everything in our brain is wired to the days of the tribal communities. And that's why us against them, so powerful. And that's also why we don't want to be ostracized from a group, because it's releasing the same chemicals that would happen if we were, put out of a tribe and we were scared of a saber-toothed tiger kind of going after us. So am I still sharing? My computer just did something funky. I will assume so if I don't hear anything.
I think the screen sharing stopped.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Can y'all see?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. I have no idea what just happened. So this is the seventh principle. And in a way, it's about belonging. So if you subscribe to any of Brene Brown's work, belonging is really the core of what we need in order to survive. And I think the best way to explain this is we categorize ourselves according to our gender, our nationality, our friends, the groups that we are a part of, the groups that we don't want to be a part of, because it helps us relate to others. We are all here and, in this group. And so we are all part of this tribe right now. It helps us feel connected. It feels like part of something bigger than ourselves. So for example, my brother and my sister and I all went to different colleges in Texas. My sister went to UT, my brother went to A&M, I went to Texas Tech. Obviously, Texas Tech is the best one out of the three. I don't have to say that, but it was almost a split tribe, right? There was this really deep loyalty to these teams, and we would not talk to each other like a week, up to playing football, because that was our new tribe. And so we don't necessarily have to choose one. We are all parts of lots of tribes, which is the interesting thing that's happening. The more, our biology is catching up with the technology. So, the goal with this principle, essentially, is to form a bond, a group of people who share something, beliefs, needs, common characteristics. That's one of the biggest things that you can do as a Scrum Master, as a coach, is create those connections, because people don't want to be alone. And so when you create this and you create unity, people feel safer. People feel more able to be authentic and really transparent. So making sure that people feel heard and people feel part of a group is, I think, one of the most beneficial ways to influence others. So for that, these are the 7. So reciprocity, commitment, consistency, social proof, liking, authority, scarcity, and unity. Like I said at the beginning, be careful how you use these 7 principles. It is very easy to use them to mislead, to deceive. For instance, selling, products at unfair prices, getting someone, something to agree to something that may not be in their best interest. So when you're using approaches like this, make sure that you do them honestly, and by being completely truthful, and by persuading people to do things that are good for them. We don't want to persuade people to do things that are terrible for them. We don't want to persuade business partners to, let something else go higher priority when it could actually be detrimental to them. If you persuade people to do things that are wrong for them, it's unethical. And it's clearly wrong to cheat or lie about these things. And it's not who we want to be as coaches, as Scrum Masters, as humans. So again, to quote Spider-Man, you have these, with great power comes great responsibility. And whereas these 7, I hope it's the same for you guys, but when I first learned about these, my mind kind of exploded. And I looked at each interaction that I was seeing, each request that I was making. I was like, man, I'm using liking a lot, or I'm using social proof a lot, but I am not using authority to the best of my ability. So I encourage you to look, in the next few days, look at the interactions that you're having and figure out kind of what you're doing, which ones you're leaning towards, and always make sure that they align to your ethics. You can use these principles whenever you want to influence or persuade others. Think about your ultimate objective, and decide which principle is the most useful one in your situation. Now, I want to end with how to resist influence. Knowing these terms, these tools are really effective, but knowing when they're being used on you is like eye-opening. So before accepting a free gift or a discounted service, or before agreeing to hear confidential information, ask yourself whether you're going to feel obligated to give the same or more in return. Should you decline so that you don't feel indebted to either that person or that situation? Before agreeing to a course of action, even at a very preliminary stage, think about the consequences of your decision. Will you feel so invested in that new course of action that you won't want to change your mind? Even though everyone else is pursuing a particular route or buying a product or, doing whatever it is, it may not be right for you. Avoid falling victim to the herd mentality. You might decide that it's not the best, to go against the trend. So like every one of our mothers said, if everyone jumped off a bridge, would you jump off as well? If the answer is yes, it probably has something to do with this lever of influence. When you feel tempted to buy a product or sign up for a service, ask yourself whether you've kind of fallen under that spell of a particularly likable salesperson. Is a salesperson similar to you, familiar to you, or, extremely complimentary? You're really pretty, Dallas. Okay, I'll buy the Maserati. Just go ahead. It happens in such a way that the other day I was actually, I was clothes shopping with my sister, and someone came in and I had tried the dress on, and the salesperson was like, that's a really, really good dress on you. And I bought it and I got it home. I was like, this is terrible. What was I doing? And I fell. I hook, line, and sinker into it. She complimented me. I took it back though. So, but make sure we understand what it is. Carefully note your reaction to authority figures. Has that person you're negotiating with triggered your respect of authority? Are you making your choice because you want to, or are you making that choice because an expert says so? And here's the hard thing. Does this person genuinely have the authority they're implying, or are they merely using symbols of that authority? Are they just putting on a doctor's lab coat, not really a doctor? And then finally, before you fall for a sales pitch, claiming that a product is running out of time, running out of stock, the discount will end soon, all of these things, do you really, really want it now? Or are you just scared that you're going to miss a deal? My husband and I have been on a search for a couch, for 6 months. And we kind of keep going back to this. And the first time he was like, well, we have to buy it now. It's 50% off. I'm like, no. And guess what? This week, it's still 50% off. So making sure that we can just kind of elevate our awareness of how we are influenced and how we can influence others can kind of save us from some sticky situations. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Derek for question and answers.
No worries. Thank you, Dallas. So group, before we move into Q&A, can I get a virtual round of applause for Dallas? Thank you for sharing your knowledge.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, crew. So what I'd invite you to do now is please add your questions to the chat. If it requires a little bit more elaboration, I'll call you on the chat just to put yourself on the camera and speak more about your question. But we have captured a couple of questions during the segment. So the first one from Prabha: how do you influence financial departments on Agile?
You're really pretty, financial department. Like, really, no, I'm kidding. The thing about financial departments that I've noticed is there's kind of some reciprocity. So the thing that I did with finance was I actually taught them Agile. I was like, you don't have to use it. This is what we're doing, right? Like, y'all are doing this thing, but I gave them information. I gave them knowledge, and there was no contract of them to do it, but just educating them firstly is really, really important. You're giving them something. And so what happened is they felt like they could give us something. Oh, well, this one project, I guess we can run in kind of a more agile budget and not ask for hours, but just give you a bucket and do that. And so they did that. And so what do I pop in with? Commitment and consistency. Okay, well, you gave us a budget and we said that we would get, we would get as much done. This is how much we got done. Can we do it again? And then do it again. And so there's different times that you'll use different things. But the first thing that I did was give them knowledge. Did that help that question?
Prabha, are you on the line still?
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
They have the basic knowledge of Agile, just that they wanted to know how they have the plan and budgeting and how they can use Agile, because the whole company is transforming to Agile. So they were thinking, oh, I'm from oil and gas, but now I'm in financial department. How do I transform myself?
Yeah, it's giving that information, and budgeting and finance and agility is its own beast. And so just kind of feeding them that information, making small little requests of them to change. Don't ask a financial department ever to change their entire process. You will be laughed off stage or out of the building by security guard. Like it is, I've done it before and fell on my face and got a, proverbial bloody nose and everything. So with that commitment and consistency, what can you get them to say yes to prove something? And then yes again. So it's kind of that, continuous learning approach to an agile adoption.
Excellent. So we had a question from Aditya on a queue. So Aditya, if you're still on the line, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, sure, Derek. Velas, that was a really nice presentation and really good pointers. Thank you so much for that. So after finishing your second point, which is the consistency and commitment, so you kind of said we are halfway through. Is that a technique in the presentation to keep the people engaged, or was it just a slip up?
No, it's usually something, hey, we're halfway through. We're doing what we say we're going to do. We're doing what we say we were going to do. And so we're making progress. So I want to make sure that you understand what that progress is.
So that was intentional, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So Dallas, I have a question here from myself is, so for any newcomers to the influence principles, what advice would you have, just thinking about your experience, to apply it, like first steps?
First steps, notice what you lean towards. I think it's really important for us to understand where we're coming from. So, I leaned a lot on reciprocity and liking, and those compliments, and I'm noticing that, and also noticing where I'm not using things is giving me the opportunity to say, hey, actually going in here with the mindset of authority, that I'm influencing with authority, because these other people in this room, you're noticing that they respond well to authority. You're noticing they respond well to experts. So my very short and very long answer is notice where you are first, and then start noticing what other people are responding to.
Gotcha.
It's not one size fits all, right? Like if, I'm talking to you, Derek, I might, and you respond, to social proof. I'm going to talk about, hey, like, here are my clients, these people have all gone through agile transformations, give you examples of who has kind of gone on the journey with me. Whereas if Rowan, liking, I'm like, Rowan, tell me about your kid, and, how is she doing? And it's not inauthentic. It's just a different way of presenting a request.
Gotcha. So how would you identify that cue on which point of influence you would be going through?
So are people responding to, just kind of notice what people are responding negatively to, which sounds weird, but if I go into a room of, software developers, 9 times out of 10, if I tell them that I was a software developer, they're like, cool, okay, she's cool, I'll listen to her. So it's kind of a swath of, but I've had kind of hundreds of interactions to base that off of. So I kind of know that there's authority there. With certain kinds of leaders, particularly in HR, I'm making very wide generalizations, and nothing is absolute, including absolution. So kind of notice, I kept, I actually brought it out for this. I kept a notebook that I actually, every meeting for about a month, I wrote down, it's like, okay, this is what I noticed with this influence. This is what I noticed with this influence. And it keeps on going back to that, but we're so, we really have to understand where we're coming from to begin that. So does that help? I know I keep giving the same answer, but just noticing is really, really important.
No, it definitely does. I picked awareness as a first step, and then from there working through, right?
Yeah, and just noticing different people, different things, right? Like I'm not going to talk to my best friend the same way I'm going to talk to one of my clients. It's situational awareness of what to bring in.
Got you. Thank you. So we have a question from Roger on striking a balance with authority. So Roger, if you're there.
Yes, I'm here. So thanks, Derek. Question, want to understand, Dallas, how do you find the balance between getting someone with authority to back your ideas to maybe implement new practices or new approach, but not having them to become a command and control scenario where we try to stay away from in an agile environment?
My favorite phrase is, why don't we just try this for 2 weeks, see how it goes? And say that over and over and over. That way it's actually not giving anyone the ability to take over this monolithic plan. It's just like, hey, let's just change this, tweak this. And those small experiments, which is what agility is based on, don't necessarily give an opportunity for someone to come in and command and control. Well, there are people that can command and control boiling water, but what we're hoping to do is we're hoping to have that commitment and consistency, right? Like, hey, we're going to just do this small thing and here's the benefit. And we're going to do this small thing and the benefit. And so if they see that there's actually progress being made without their hands in it, maybe support, that's something that I've approached with people who, without malice, just really want to help the progress along and maybe help a little too much. Like when you hold a baby and you're like, I want to like hug this baby so hard because they're so cute, like that kind of command and control. Let's just leave the baby over here with them. It's a terrible analogy, but that's what came up.
Dallas, thanks for that. But I think my question is more to do with not using my own authority to influence, but using someone else's authority to influence, so such as someone like a manager or like a senior management. So in that scenario, I see that might be an opportunity to turn this into, hey, because the senior manager is saying that we should try this idea, it becomes a direct order from them. How do you manage that? So it's still trying to get the team to do something differently, influence them. However, it's not becoming, hey, because the manager tells us to do this, so we have to do it unwillingly. This was more my questions. Yeah,
absolutely. So does the team need to know where that idea came from before?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Not necessarily hiding it, right? Like I don't want to be manipulative, but if it's an idea let's just try the idea. Focus on the thing versus focus on where it came from. So, hey, here's an
Okay.
idea I heard. What do y'all think?
Yep, that could work. Yeah, it could be an approach. Thanks. It's a simple
for sure.
answer. Cheers.
So we've got a question from Henry about the power of influence and when influence can't work. So Henry, if you're there on the line, the floor is yours.
Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Is it? Oh, cool. Oh, yes. No, yeah, I'm just thinking, like, as a Scrum Master, you could be in a situation in a team where there's one person in the team that's just adamant, I don't want to work in an Agile way of working. And you're just not getting anywhere with that particular person. And it is that at some point you just have to accept that that person's not ready to change at that point in time and just focus on the rest of the team. And maybe they can never change. Maybe they're just not meant for the team, and or maybe they're way off. That maybe down the track you can try influence them. But I'm just wondering if there's some sort of threshold when you know the influence is not going to work with a particular person and to give up.
Yeah, it's does having a conversation with that person make you have to have a drink in that, after work that day? Probably. I'm kidding. But there's kind of a return on investment. If that person's real high cost, accept your high costness. But I would also invite you to consider if it's that one person and the other part of the team is starting to get momentum and starting to get around, what they've just given you an opportunity to do is influence by unity. Nobody wants to be the outcast of a tribe. And so kind of moving along, maybe not focusing so much on that individual, but the health of the overall team can actually put that unity influence in place without you having to do anything with that specific person.
Yep. And that's it. Yeah, that sounds like what's happened in my experience too. So that, yeah, that sounds like probably the right way to go. Yeah. Cool.
Don't bang your head against the wall too much. It'll hurt you, but it won't hurt them.
Thanks.
Okay, so we have a question from Jason on culture. So Jason, if you're on the line still.
Hi, Dallas. Nice to meet you
Hi.
guys. I just want to pop on to one question. I was just wondering, in the line of my work, I'm involved in a lot of engaging with international clients, and mainly this has to do with the context of understanding culture really fast. And it came down to my question. I just want to know, how do you maybe potentially learn a culture really fast, mainly from the 7 principle that you mentioned about, and to a point where in the future, in near future, I can make deals and agreements with that client fast. Yeah,
it's such a good question, and it is a soapbox for me. So I could probably get on this and talk about how to honor cultures in agility for the next hour and a half, but I won't. My short answer is there is so much research about cultures in general, and it's really putting in the work beforehand. So when I'm coaching teams from Japan or Malaysia or Israel, I really reset myself, and actually in my coaching agreements and working agreements, I set aside like, okay, what do I need to know and what do you need to know about this culture? And so really asking either the people that you're engaging with or the team. Right. I actually just had a chartering session with a Slovakian team and Slovakian, US, and Japanese, which talk about time level or time management across time zones. But just pose the question, what does this mean to you? And having them be able to facilitate, or being able to facilitate a conversation is really, really beneficial. Just kind of, I know it seems like a really simplistic answer, but bringing up the topic and being able to facilitate a conversation with it is really invaluable.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Dallas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just looking at the time, I think we have a lucky last question here from Prabha. So do you think it is safe to have a agile policy to influence people in the organization? So Prabha, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Going back to my earlier question that wonderfully answered by Dallas, thank you for that. Being a regulated environment, do you think that having a agile policy would really influence people, take a step back, okay, I need to do this, follow these guidelines? But nevertheless, we of course we do not want them to embrace the agile like a regulatory guidance. Is more to embracing agile as a culture. So is it safe to have an agile policy to influence people?
We might have very different opinions on this call. I think that once you put a policy in place for culture, you're turning culture into a policy, and that never works. So it's like me telling my kid, like, be happy in the morning when I wake you up. Like, he'll fake it all day long, but like cursing me in the back of his mind when I'm driving him to school. You can't policy your way into a better culture.
Agree. Turning culture into policy. That's fantastic.
Thank you, folks. And that wraps up our Q&A component. Back over to you, Roman.
Yeah, look, I'd just like to invite us all to thank Dallas again. I got heaps out of that, so I hope you all did. And thanks so much for all those questions. Lots of really thoughtful questions and some of those answers, yeah, I really took a lot away from as well, Dallas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for letting me crash your party. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much. And I hope you feel, more connection, right? We're trying to, have this connection across the Tasman and, with all of those that joined from all sorts of places around Australia and New Zealand and elsewhere. Yeah. Thank you. Well, thanks for joining, everyone. That's all we have, I guess, for this evening, unless anyone wants to stick around and just chat. But hope to see you next month. Thank you, Dallas, again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dallas.
Thank you.
Derek.
Thanks,
That's
Derek.
valuable.
Thanks, Dallas.
See ya.
See you guys.